GetEvangelized.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Shunya One. I am Amit, sitting in from Shiladitya, who is doing all kinds of interesting things, which he's just about to tell us about. Unfortunately, because he's doing interesting things, he's not in studio.
Yes, I'm not in the studio. Sorry.
What are these interesting things that you got going?
Well, I have just got back from a massive 5-day vacation / detox / disconnect from civilization in the Himalayas, where there are no podcasts.
So you went to do meditation? You went for one of those...
No, I went on a trek. I went on an awesome trek, and which was pretty cool. In fact, the only stuff I did have was the stuff on my phone, which are podcasts.
There you go.
And music.
See, that's the advantage of podcasts. You can listen to podcasts anywhere you are. If you download them, it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of the Himalayas, you can still listen to podcasts.
Absolutely. But that does not stop us from announcing what we have in store for this episode.
Yes.
We're talking to Lavin Mirchandani, who's going to talk to us about some very cool and very current topics of influencer marketing and how it's become a legit real business and how his company does some very interesting things around it.
Yep.
And of course, we are coming up on almost our 50th episode, Amit.
Yes, we
can't
are.
believe we've been doing this for a year almost.
It's been a year, that's true. We haven't missed a day too. Remember, we did that one random little episode because you were sick, but we haven't missed a week.
Exactly. So we have something interesting planned. We will announce the details on our Slack channel. You better join there and join us on the 19th in Mumbai for some interesting things.
Yeah, we're planning a live Shunya One, but details are to come.
Yup. All right. So let's get on with our show today.
Hey, welcome to the show. Today we are talking to Lavin Mirchandani, the founder of GetEvangelized, and a good friend and a common social media connect with a bunch of us founders here in Mumbai. Welcome to the show, Lavin.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Yes, I'm glad you could make it. I'm sorry about dragging you all the way here post your vacation in Goa. I think, which you've come back with a sore throat from.
Yes, I have.
But glad to have you here, finally.
Pleasure.
And I hope we're going to have a fun show talking about some cool things and maybe controversial things about how the very hot space of quote-unquote influencer marketing works.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about analytics. Okay, all right, let's talk about influencer marketing.
But great to have you here, Lavin. Why don't you tell listeners about your story so far?
Hey, so thanks for having me here, Shiladitya and Amit. So GetEvangelized has been a fun ride for us. It's been a little over 2 years so far. We've built it as a creators marketplace. Creator is anybody who creates content online and engages a community around that, his or her area of interest or passion, right? And by virtue of that, this person becomes very interesting for a brand to collaborate with when the brand wishes to engage that specific TG. So what we do as a platform is we have creators from multiple platforms and walks of life who connect their social accounts with us, and analytics, yes, we do analyze content. We analyze their engagement, and we find out who's most relevant for engaging a particular type of TG, who's most relevant for a particular story format, who's most relevant for a particular idea, right? So using a little bit of data, a little bit of qualitative analytics, we sort of give a mix to the brand and say, hey, these are the most interesting people who you could engage with and co-create content with. Fundamentally powering word of mouth and advocacy programs. Yeah.
Awesome. I think, of course, you guys have built a whole platform around it and, really productize this sort of thing. But coming over the past few years, we've sort of seen this space explode in terms of how many people are
influencers.
Yeah, sort of making a living off of being influencers, and across. I mean, I think I'm just like you guys know.
BMW.
Well, there are folks on Instagram who are constantly doing whatever brand they're influencing, right? Or a bunch of brands they're influencing. And of course, Twitter, and of course, everywhere else. How did you jump into this? Because I know you from your days working or volunteering with TIE, a bunch of other startup organizations from Barcamp and a whole lot of other things. Right. So what made you come up to this space and say, let's productize this and go after this space?
Actually, serendipity, right? So Merck Media, the parent company, I started as a social media analytics company, right? We were helping consumer brands and Bollywood films understand and make sense of data. And that's when we discovered the whole open space where television monitoring and celebrity hiring was sort of a very big market which was not using data at all. There was TAM, but which was one parallel data set for television. But with the whole second screen phenomena that came in, there was nobody tapping into it circa 2011. So we jumped into that game and thought, can we actually monitor social media and figure out who's watching which television show, who's liking which actor, who's sort of resonating with what kind of content happening on TV. And there was a lot of correlation in what we could see and measure on social and what was happening on the Hindi GECs. And Big Boss used to be one of the popular shows at that time. I mean, it still is.
Still is, yeah.
And with the data, the dashboard that we created, we were able to actually predict which contestant would get sort of evicted and which contestant would actually be brought back, etc.
Just on like sentiment analysis?
Just by social chatter, sentiment, who's rooting for which actor, etc., etc. So a lot of data is available on listening, but TV is a big behemoth, and we couldn't crack that. So we realized that the same challenge and the same opportunity exists with celebrities. Brands are buying celebrities just by the perceived value of what the celebrity stands for, basis PR and what you read in Bombay Times and what a person across the table can convince you, right? The same celebrity is was being sort of projected as a very peppy and cute personality archetype, which was being sold to Cadbury's, and in the next meeting, the same person was being pitched for the cover of magazine, right? So there are two different archetypes but the same person, and it's about how you can convince. So we realized that data is missing, and that a lot of data is available on social media. What kind of people are your fans, right? Just because you have 50 million followers doesn't mean that the entire country is a fan of yours. You actually command and target and engage a certain demographic, right?
Right.
And the way that demographic was sold is by showing your last movie.
Yeah.
So if your last movie tanked, then your rate fell down, right, in the markets. If your last movie did brilliantly, your price went up, which is good. But then it's the fan base which is constant across your movies, across your sitcoms or whatever you're doing, right? That is what social media was giving us. So we actually extended the television dashboard to celebrities, and we went to market saying that, hey, if you want to hire Ranveer Singh versus Ranbir Kapoor for the next automobile that you're launching, who's the better guy, right? And there was data to prove that, right?
Based on their audience. And
based on their
audience,
based on what people reacted to when a Ranveer spoke about a car versus when a Ranbir spoke about a car, right? So probably this guy worked better when he was selling Durex condoms, and Ranbir worked better when he was selling certain cars and automobiles. So every actor had his or her forte and strengths,
correct,
which was very measurable when you looked at social data. Now, social would be a small sample in comparison with what's available in the market, I mean the whole universe, but a very representative stand. So we went to market, we did a few pilots with a bunch of brands. Yash Raj was one of our first adopters. We did some work with Myntra, a bunch of others, and here's what we realized, a brand buys a celebrity and does a contract for a couple of years. So if I sell the report to the brand, there's nothing that the brand is going to buy back from me after 2 years.
Right.
Right. So the business model was flawed. We were like so kicked. But after making the early sales, we were like, wow, how do we repeat this? Right? What do we do for the next 2 years? This brand really can't buy stuff from me, right? And we were dabbling around with ideas on how to make this scalable, repeatable, etc., etc. And that's when one of my friends pointed out this whole influencer marketing business to me and said, hey, look at this influencer business. Every brand is hiring those same 100 influencers just because they have followers, and there's no method, there's no scientific approach to hiring influencers. And we said, this seems to be the similar problem which we were experiencing in celebrities. And we said, these are micro celebrities. They are also celebrities in their own little circle.
Right.
Why don't we take the same tech and apply that? We did a couple of pilots with a few agency friends, free of cost, And
for the exposure.
Yeah. Absolutely. The exposure was pretty good. We got to work with Flipkart as one of our first clients.
So doing it for the exposure actually did work out for you.
Yeah, it did work out for us. And I mean, they loved the work. It was an indirect client, but they sort of knew that we were working on it. And I think the data that we used and the agency that sort of deployed the execution of influencers, that sort of made it very effective. They experienced a 6x ROI compared to the other advertising formats they were using at that time. That led us to repeating business with Flipkart for almost 6-7 times.
Wow.
In the same.
So what would you say is the difference between this, where you're going for the influencers themselves,
right,
as opposed to where you're doing stuff with the more mainline type celebrities, right? I mean, like, I get that you said that there's a difference in terms of the ROI that the brand was able to achieve there. But what do you think was like the fundamental difference that caused that change in ROI? Was it just that they were lower cost, or was there something else going on there?
So the question is the influencers versus celebrities?
Right. You were talking about how celebrities, it was a non-repeatable business, whereas the influencers proved to be a repeatable business.
Yeah, it's repeatable because it's very cost effective, right? Okay. A celebrity contract would be a few crores, whereas an influencer contract would be a few lakhs that you may just spend over a weekend as a brand. And you may say, hey, this out of these 50 people I hired, those 20 didn't work out, these 30 worked out. Let's replace these guys, and then in the next month or the next quarter, you'll try with a few other.
So it's the broader spread that kind of.
It's a broader spread. The contracts are different. A celebrity is locked in for probably a year, 2 years, or 3 years, right? I mean, if he doesn't work, then you're stuck with him or her. With the influencers, you are actually evaluating and sort of reshuffling your media mix every.
Yeah, it's probably. I guess it's probably beneficial even for the brand, right? I mean, they get to do a little bit of trial and error, including at a much lower risk factor, of course, and they get to improve their set of micro celebrities they work with instead of just having that one big guy.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. But I was just trying to get it was cost the only driving factor over there, or was there...
the data, right? I mean, I'd assume that the data is richer a quarter down about who are the right people for your brand. Right. You also have the feedback loop from the first campaign you did and so on.
Absolutely.
So what I was trying to actually get at without getting it was, does the fact that most of these influencers operate in certain niches, was that helpful in basically in increasing the ROI, or was it more of or was it mostly cost that kind of multiplied that?
So cost is definitely one of the key driving factors of ROI because that's the denominator. In addition to that, if you do a celebrity versus an influencer, so for us there are 3 categories broadly speaking. You look at a celebrity, let's say Ranbir Singh is a celebrity. You look at a micro celebrity who's between an influencer and so a micro celebrity would be, say, a TV star. Let's look at Ravin Mirchandani, right? And then you have brand advocates, subject matter experts. So we refer to all these as creators, right? Influencers is a very, very abused word and it's sort of become derogatory. So we try not to use that in our communication as far as possible. So a micro celebrity, and an average creator who could be a brand advocate, subject matter expert, right? I may not be like known because I am from the world of glamour, or I'm not being covered by the press or seen on TV.
But I have a good page, I have a blog.
I mean, look at Sheila Aditya, right?
There you go.
He's
a tech influencer. Right. He is an influencer. He's a tech influencer. Number 1.
Tech creator now with this podcast. We are creating content here.
I forgot, creator.
Yes. So then there are these 3 buckets, right? And then you choose. So in the first bucket, the celebrity, it's the cost is the maximum. The cost keeps on reducing as you go downwards, right? The second parameter that comes in is credibility and authenticity, right? So when you look at these celebrities, you know that they are paid by brands. When they're doing an endorsement, you know it's paid. So the level of authenticity is really not top notch, right? Of course, it's the cloud that you're relying on, but the authenticity increases across buckets. The next item comes is the reach, right? So a Shah Rukh Khan is phenomenal reach, right? So you would probably lean on him for that reach and you would pay him for that reach. And then you come to a micro celebrity who have a little lower reach.
Right.
And then you come to a creator which is much, much lower reach. But then what you're looking at, why would you hire a creator when this guy has much higher reach and much higher clout, is because you want to lean on this person for the authenticity. This person is actually a person who's known in the tech circle. Right. That's his area of passion. And he's going to engage and collaborate with the brand only when it's around his area of passion
Right.
versus celebrity who would probably
Do it for the money, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the authenticity and credibility that a subject matter expert, a brand advocate brings onto the table matters a lot, right? That's what brands are looking for, and I think that's where this is an interesting game overall.
Yeah, that's what's caused this sort of upheaval of creators as a focus area, right? Or even being relevant for a brand.
Because of the subject matter expertise, right? That is...
Yeah, I mean, because of the genuine following that they command,
Right.
instead of just the mass. It's like saying, like, why a hoarding of yesteryears versus a newspaper ad, a hoarding ad, like typical broadcast sort of media, versus a Instagram ad or a Facebook ad or something which is much more nuanced and targeted, right? So I think it's in the same line of using data as a reference point to find the right people and right impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's where this is heading. We are into the analytics space now, where more and more data will be collected about you, and
whether you know it or not,
and it will be used by all of these agencies and platforms to target you better. But again, I for one like that. I don't want to see an ad which is not relevant.
I
to
like
me.
targeted ads. I have no problem with targeted.
When I do see one, or when I do hear it from people I follow, like for people who I consider genuine and authentic, I think the response is great. I think it's a lot more positive than I follow a bunch. So as an example, I follow a bunch of tech curated lists, like newsletters, right? And anything referenced on that newsletter is actually very high impact for me. It's like, I'll definitely see it, I will click it, I will open it, I will listen to what the guy has to say about it, and probably consider it. So stuff like that. Taking a step back from there also, right? Obviously, you've been working in this space of various with agencies and so on. What's the downside of this? I know it's very. We were talking earlier about how being able to do this as an agency, this whole space is crowded around, being bad paymasters, not paying on time and stuff like that. How do you take a product? How do you use the tech to your advantage here to, bring more efficiency to this whole process?
Right. So that's one of the insights we got early on before we started this business. And, what I did is I started calling up these so-called influencers of that time, and I asked them, how do you get your deals? What are the challenges that you face? Are you enjoying this? And then we had the same conversation with the buyers, because we're making a marketplace, so we wanted to understand both the buyers and sellers. And we got a few insights, and you were right, you're bang on that payment was a big issue, and people were not getting paid on time. And just because they were not getting paid on time, they were going out public and actually talking about the brand and the agency that did not pay them, right? And that just gets you a lot of negative publicity with the person you're working with. And a lot of agencies face that. We saw a lot of news channels and publishers cover these, mob scenes that got created online, and it was unfortunate. But when we spoke to the agencies, they had their reasons, which involved cash flows and, using parking funds in liquid.
All sorts of usual business reasons, yes.
Right. But the challenge is, after spending a little bit of time in this industry, is what we understood is that the agencies were running this for the brands, right? Because most of the media buying activity happens through agencies, and agencies were not equipped to deal with such a phenomenon which had so many vendors involved.
A bunch of small payments instead of a few big payments.
Correct. So for an agency, there's a vendor empanelment process. So for example, if I have to work as an influencer, I need to be a vendor to get my payment. And to be a vendor, I need to submit a bunch of documents and do an undertaking, NDAs. The agencies have all sorts of documents which their parent global agencies demand.
The bigger the agency, the more the process.
So there's a process, and for an individual who's probably making $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, he's not so equipped to have these documents ready: service tax numbers, PAN cards, invoices, and then you have to submit your invoice in a specific format, so on and so forth, right? So what was happening is there was a gap in this whole process where the agency was trying to empanel these influencers and the process was taking longer, so they used to go ahead because the campaign had to go live,
Right.
and work used to be done, and then this process used to be left out.
Right. And
Right.
it's tedious when you haven't done it on time. It's equally painful to do it yourself.
Absolutely. So payments cannot be released, and and even if you have done it, the agencies used to get back, branch used to get back, hey, the invoice doesn't have my GST number or my whatever,
Yeah, every year
my
there's a
service
new
tax number or my
there's
whatever.
a new accounting.
So for a poor influencer who's a creator, he's a creative guy. He suddenly has to do all this accounting, and they never got paid on time, and that was one of the biggest challenges. The second challenge was for agencies and brands to find interesting creators. So how do I discover? The deals are going to the same 100 people who are the Twitter circles.
Yes.
Right, the Twitterati, the mafia that ran the scene. And the same guy was doing an endorsement for a food brand in the morning, and a fashion brand in the evening, and a tech brand the next day. And just because I have 100,000 followers, I'm an influencer, and that was the definition of the influencer. Right. So, which was fundamentally flawed, right? You're hiring the person for his reach and not for what he stands for or what his followers follow him for. Just like you said, you have this curated list of tech newsletters.
Right.
So whatever they say is something that you would want to consume because you're following them for tech.
Yeah, if they start talking fashion, I'll be
just hit unsubscribe, right, and spam and whatever. So that was the second problem, and the agency said, hey, we're going to do this because we don't know where to find these guys, right? And so discovery was an issue. Finding relevance was an issue. Processing payments was an issue. So he said, yeah, these look like fundamental marketplace problems, right? And what we decided is, we said, we're going to solve these problems by building a supply side, ensuring the supply side is sort of KYC'd in a way. So what we've done is we built a tech platform that sort of does a online KYC of every influencer. Nice. It's a 5-minute process for them. They just need to upload their checks and PANs and whatever, and they're sorted. And for the buyer just basically comes into our platform and plugs in, and the whole empanelment process becomes seamless, right? Nice. So for the seller, it's just easy, and it's just like setting up a PayPal account, right? You just mention your bank details, your checks and all. There's a 7-day verification process, right, and you're set, right? Awesome. The payment just flows into a bank whenever it comes in. The second thing that we did is we set realistic payment expectations. So, with the buyers and the sellers, you have to sort of maintain that expectation setting. And agencies are used to credit, right? 60-day, 90-day, and, after the client pays. There's this clause in every agency purchase order that payment will be released after the client pays us. Yeah. Bhai sahab, wo to aapka client hai, right? Huh. You are my client. That
shouldn't apply to me,
right? Yeah, so how do I know the client has paid you or not paid you? So they have this devilish clause in every. So we had to negotiate this and sort of break the norms of what they were used to, where they were only used to paying upfront for production,
right?
Because that involves, they won't start, right? So we had to tell them that, hey, we can't start.
Yeah,
these guys won't start until you put in an advance on the table, or you sort of ensure that a certain payment timeline is committed and also delivered, right? So, and then we had to constantly tell them that if you don't do that, see these bad examples, which went public, that could happen to you, right? Gaur se dekho, ye aapke saath ho sakta hai, right? That kind of thing. So we had to do all of that, and there's still a lot of ground to be covered. It's not that everybody's on the same page, but they get it, right? So we've got that part. And for the discoveries, we built an engine that sort of keeps on feeding and finding new creators. So we've got interesting creators from different parts of the country, over 40 cities and places like Katni, Gurdaspur, Chhattisgarh, different parts of Bengal. So we got artists also from different southern states. Tollywood, Sandalwood, Mollywood.
What? I haven't.
What is Sandalwood?
I didn't know that was an actual. It's something I learned from the industry.
Is that an actual film?
Yeah,
industry?
It is. Okay. So Tollywood is Telugu.
That I knew.
Bollywood is Malayalam. Sandalwood is, I think, Karnataka or something.
Must be Karnataka.
Yeah, I guess. So a lot of these actors and singers from these regions have signed up. Bengali, small upcoming actors who I wouldn't know. A brand manager sitting in Bombay wouldn't know, but probably he's relevant in that region. So if you're an FMCG brand that's looking at targeting at multiple regions, you can't really have a one standard national campaign, right? You have to think regional, you have to go local. So that's the diversity we are bringing on board. And these are people, a lot of these people have never experienced a brand engagement opportunity.
Yeah.
A lot of TV stars who worked with us got their first deals through us, right?
Wow.
And it was crazy for them. I know some people actually, when they get onto a user onboarding calls and they're like, hey, tweet करने के पैसे मिलेंगे क्या बात है, right? It's like crazy for them, right? Like, अच्छा इसके भी मिलते हैं. So it's like, yeah, I mean, if you do it right, आपको मिलेंगे. And then there are, on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who just abuse it and they just keep on, monetizing. Like you mentioned about that Instagram account that keeps on monetizing, and there's a deal, brand. That sort of kills the hen that lays the golden eggs, right? So on both sides you have this, and on the demand we also sort of solve the problem of relevance and context by building this analytics engine that sort of analyzes content on social channels.
Nice.
That tells you that, hey, this guy's got 100k followers, but how engaging is he, right? How engaging is this person for food versus tech, right? So if I've got a 100k follower guy versus a 5,000 follower guy, and you're a food brand and this guy drives more engagement, so he probably should be commanding a higher price.
Right. Yep.
So that kind of insights is what we give to brands, but then some of them just look at the follower count still, right? They're like, okay, this looks fancy, but I can only sell this guy. So
it's a long road to educating the brand, but that's awesome to hear. I think we're gonna take a quick break, come back, talk some more about this very interesting space.
Sure.
Every week comes a show where three people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on the IVM Podcast app to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
All right, welcome back. I was going to ask Lavin at the end of the last half that while all this is great as a platform, obviously you're building some really cool tech to organize this very disorganized and skewed market, right? When it comes to, people working with creators and so on. And creators themselves are a phenomenon which like you said, have come around in the last so many years. And that's because there are so many social channels today and there are different kinds of social channels today. And I think every few years there's a new one. Like there was no Snapchat creator maybe 2 years ago, but now it exists. I think 10 years ago or even then there were the start of the blog writers.
Right.
There's podcasts now. There's so many different formats in which you can actually find a creator, right? Versus the same celebrity who, when the agency used to pay the celebrity, and they still do, they pay them to put their face on a hoarding, on a magazine, or, endorse their product. But with these sort of creators, the dynamics are so different. I mean, there's so much diversity in which who for what TG, who for what kind of audience, who is better on Instagram versus Twitter versus Snapchat, and then tomorrow there'll be another network. So what's your take on how do you manage so much of diversity in types of in this whole situation?
So for us, as a platform, we are network agnostic, right? So today we have about 10 or 12 social networks on our platform. Tomorrow there's a 13th one that comes up. We'll be happy to integrate that with us, right? The core value of this platform as it keeps on growing is that today and probably a year later and probably a couple of years later, we are hosting some of the movers and shakers of the Indian internet as users on our platform, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a school or a college, right? The teacher stays, the building stays, but the students move out. They graduate from the school to the college, from the college to the, same happens with platforms, right? We moved out from Orkut. We came on. Yes. We moved out from MySpace. We went to Orkut. We moved out from Orkut. We went to Facebook.
Was there a phase of Orkut influencers?
Probably not. It was.
I was studying, I guess, when Orkut died. Right. I don't know about that.
So there were crazy conversations on Orkut for sure, but I don't think that there were influencers. They didn't have a follow thing, right? It was all personal connections. Right. So for influencers to be a thing, you need to have like some sort of follow mechanism, I think.
Correct. But influencers who are creators actually, just like Get Evangelized, are also platform agnostic. They find new and new platforms which get them a method to distribute their content which they create, because they're creators fundamentally, right? So today, if Facebook is seeing sort of downfall in its engagement, people are moving on to Snapchat, they're moving on to Instagram, right? There's Musically that's come in, that's sort of seeing some engagement, right? So these creators are a constant. Platforms, I think, come and move, and of course there'll be new and new creators will be added also. So I don't see that as a challenge, as long as you are engaging the community of creators around you and you're hosting them. I think you're going to be in business for a long time. Platforms are going to come and go, and there's a lot of Chinese networks trying to come into India, Southeast Asian networks coming into India. So
we've spoken in the past about like stuff like Bigo and like live streaming, and again, the network which becomes popular is due to so many factors, right? We keep talking about how big data, the availability of data is such a big thing.
Absolutely.
Like we spoke with Vivek last week about how data itself is something which has gone to tier 2 and tier 3 and given so many people access, right? And they are opening up to this whole world of social media and this whole world of content which they've not seen before.
Absolutely.
So there's always ever increasing market.
There's an ever increasing market, and when a network like live streaming or some other network from China or Southeast Asia comes into India, guess who are the early adopters? It's the same people who currently are on Get Evangelized and the creators.
Oh, yeah,
right?
I look at what was that new Facebook clone that Saudi billionaire started, Vero or something like that, and so I signed up, and I saw the who signed up for that. All the influencer types. That was
Absolutely.
the only person. Those were the only people on it. No quote unquote real people.
Absolutely, and that's the growth hacking technique that a lot of these networks are also approaching. They come to us and they say, "Hey, let us get the early adopters from India who are influencers, and the others will follow suit." So I think that works brilliantly. So I don't think that's something that we have to worry from a long-term business point of view. But I think as long as our core of being close to creators is something we remain true to, and we continue, I think we're going to be in business hopefully for a long time.
Let me ask something that just kind of came from what you mentioned a few minutes ago, right? So a big part of the value proposition is the fact that you're accumulating and making sense of all of this data that's coming in, right?
Yes.
How does we've had these recent controversies, right? The Cambridge Analytica and other controversies, which we'll not mention. But we've had these controversies recently.
Right.
And it feels like there's going to be some pushback, right, in terms of the kind of data they're going to make available for platforms at large to be able to access through API.
Sure.
How much of a challenge do you see in those kinds of areas? You're from Facebook, you're probably pulling a bunch of different kinds of things, right?
Correct.
If they restrict that, how does that affect your product? Is that going to be a thing is that something that you're seeing as a potential issue in the future?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern, and a lot of platforms are trying to block their data as we see, a lot of these issues coming in, and Facebook and a bunch of others started with their APIs and their SDKs saying that, hey, we got to grow together and let's build things together. And now that they've become so big, now they're like, hey, we don't need you, right? So, you probably become bigger than me, so I'm going to sort of block my, right? So you probably build an ad network on top of me and I eat into my revenue. Right. I'm going to block you down. So that's a trend we are seeing definitely. Right. So what we also see is a lot of revenue that could be potential revenue for social networks is flowing into companies like us, because this would have been advertising dollars spent directly on the platform. So we've seen interesting reactions. Facebook has come up with something called brand handshake. So has Instagram, right? So what they actually make you do is, if you're an influencer and you're doing a brand sponsored post, you tag the brand on Facebook, and then Facebook gives the brand the opportunity to promote that post. Okay. Right. So if the influencer's post doesn't actually get engagement, which Facebook will ensure it doesn't, quote unquote,
it does not.
Right. So it gives the opportunity to the brand to directly sponsor or boost that post, which it cannot, because as a brand I can only boost my own post. So this is a new mechanism that they've got in.
I've seen those in paid partnership with
so
Correct.
and so.
Yeah.
So this works phenomenally in the US because they have FTC regulations, and in general, it's a good ethical practice to make disclosures. If you're doing that, it's
Right.
good for your community. But in India, it's not a must-have from a legal standpoint, right? But let's see how that plays out in the long run, and how Facebook and Instagram and all these networks react to it. Probably they may just build a GetEvangelized of their own or acquire one of us.
That was my follow-up question, right? I mean, like, do you see this as something like them sitting on top and just kind of absorbing into part of their product?
Yeah, they can. But then, as I said, we are network agnostic. So Facebook can probably build a network on Facebook and Instagram. So for a brand who needs influencers who are on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, they can't go to Facebook, right? So that will always be a differentiator. That would save us in some way. But yeah, definitely.
This is the threat. I mean, this is also something come up in the past about how when you build your platform on top of another platform, you always risk the platform pulling the rug, right, under you. So there's always going to be that. But of course, like you said, your ability to be cross-platform or platform agnostic is where this will come in handy. Another point, which just to add to Amit's point, was a lot of, since you're also in the advertising space, right? This is the promotion space.
True.
A lot of these networks, in the effort to try to still be relevant and personal, and not to kill the whole one-to-one sort of personal engagement that happens across these networks, I know they are also suddenly wary to too much advertising.
Yeah.
Right.
The fact that every third post is a promoted post out of 10 is going to actually cause in the network's genuine users to also drop off.
It's not just the promoted posts. It's like even the page posts, right? Promoted is one thing, but even like posts from pages have all of a sudden stopped, like completely dropped off the map.
Exactly. I know Instagram had a massive surge in that, right? Where every second or third was a page or an ad or whatever. And then they realized. So I think every network deals with this figuring out the right threshold of how much to be paid and how much to be genuine. Where do you see you guys maybe improving on that, or using that or benefiting, or is that a possible problem in when you're trying to crack a deal like this?
From a network's perspective, I think most networks are trying to make it more human-driven from the content. So if you read Mark Zuckerberg's annual letter this year, he said, Facebook is going to be more focused on people's stories. Right, that's good for businesses like ours because we are actually in the business promoting people's stories, right? We get people to talk about what they liked, what they ate, and what they did, which is what networks were primarily about. And somewhere in the middle, we got lost in getting brands on board and getting them to spend, right? So it's good that that's their vision, probably for Instagram as well. And other networks should follow suit as well. That's what makes networks interesting for other users to stay tuned, right? So from that point of view, I think we are pretty aligned from users, sort of consuming people's stories. But where it breaks is when some of these creators, when they get a kick of monetizing their social networks, they say, hey, wow, I can do this, and I can do this 5 times, I can do this 10 times.
And I can only do this.
I only do this. So it's just like that story where, you sort of, instead of getting the golden eggs, you said, I'm just going to open up, rip the hen apart and see how many eggs I get. And you just lost all the eggs that you could potentially get.
Very gruesome analogy, but
yeah, but that's what happens, right? You stop getting deals because your grid becomes a mismatch of brands, right? And you're like, hey, I really don't want to hire this guy because all he's talking about is brands. The reason why brands would probably think of collaborating with you is because you were talking and known for some content that you had, right? So if you sort of dilute that to an extent,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. Yeah.
In fact, another point I was realizing is not just obviously networks reacting to the surge of too much sponsored stuff, but also recently Twitter just, I think, banned advertising crypto as a segment, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. They did that to prevent because a lot of people were doing scammy crypto posts. So you can't buy an ad on Twitter for a crypto property. I mean, you can talk about it, but you can't buy an ad, right? So there are these regulatory things which also come in. Again, like we've spoken about how a lot of the old industry of ads, of advertising, feels that the social advertising space is not regulated enough. You know? I mean, I think our very first episode with Girish
was around
around exactly this, about how there is no body governing how you can say things or what you can say, can't say, whereas there is for television, there is for newspaper, there is for every other traditional media platform. What's your take on that, and how do you see that evolving? Or
do you want a body of some nature giving you standards, or is it better to have the free-for-all marketplace?
I think as the volume and turnover of this industry increases, regulatory intervention would be needed, just like any other industry. So native ads is something that multiple networks are looking at in their own ways. Influencer marketing is a small piece of native advertisement, So if you are Yahoo.com, a lot of brands are buying content within your content, right? Which is also native ads, right? So fundamentally, when you're hiring a creator, you're buying content, placing content within a content stream. So this is an extension of native advertising. And, I think as the spend on native advertising increases in a couple of years, you'll see regulatory intervention. What FTC is in the US, probably we'll have a version of that in India. And I think that's fair to see that. But until then, there's also an opportunity, because things which are banned or which are banned by networks like cryptocurrencies, you can't advertise on Facebook. I was reading a blog by DigitalOcean, and I think some of those credits that you get for these servers, you cannot actually use them for mining cryptocurrencies and building other crypto assets. So a lot of businesses are sort of banning things like crypto for the good, for the bad is something that for each to figure.
Right.
But in such cases, I think collaborating directly with creators is a very interesting opportunity for brands, because the contract is directly between the brand and the creator. And if you are a cryptocurrency brand, you can actually talk to an enthusiast and say that, hey, can you just spread word of mouth and help me build an advocacy program with creating content, educating people about cryptocurrencies. Right. If you actually are an investor and not a speculator, you may want to do that, right, as a creator. Right. So it's an opportunity as well for a lot of brands who come into that surrogate category of advertising, and it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities.
Yeah, that's true. But it's going to be crazy to actually build regulation around these sort of diverse and dynamic.
It's going to be crazy, yeah, because we've experienced that with the whole Maggie fiasco, right?
Yeah.
Which is celebrities who endorse Maggie, and then something happened to the product, and then suddenly the endorsers were sort of held responsible, and that is sort of a debate that's going on in the industry.
Or James Bond endorsing Pan Masala.
Pan Parag.
Yes. Yes. No, but I mean, it's even an issue, when you're talking about, in the Maggie case, right, it was Madhuri Dixit and it was Amitabh Bachchan, right? It was these people who kind of but again, they're like national campaign runners. Absolutely. So it's like, the celebrity bucket, your first bucket.
Absolutely.
As opposed to what happens when Maggie is doing a campaign with your third bucket, where they have 1,000 different influencers across the country.
Right.
Now, at that point in time, I think the risk gets diffused, right? Because who's going to go after a bunch of 1,000 different people with 10,000 followers each?
Absolutely, but you can still go. I mean, if the regulation is in place, you can still go behind those 1,000 people if you really want to make a point.
But this was not regulatory, right? I mean, they got brickbats from public at large. It wasn't like the regulators went after them, right?
Yeah, I think something did.
There was a case.
There was a case
was
about...
it really? Okay, sorry. Okay, everything I said was wrong. Never mind.
No, there was a case about, especially with Maggie, I think there was I don't know if it was a big case, but it was about how it's the celebrity's responsibility to...
that's nonsense.
To consider them endorsing something which is wrong or something.
Maggie.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, come on, it's as big a brand as there gets, right? I mean, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to do their own food testing?
That's the expectation.
That is a ridiculous expectation.
But even after the food tasting, I mean, they're not technically equipped to find out what goes into
Yeah, no, exactly. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to buy a Maggie from a random market and send it for chemical analysis? That's
Absolutely.
an insane kind of standard.
So there's good faith and goodwill, and, so that was an interesting case, and I think if such cases and such regulatory things come in, I think influencers are someday going to be affected by that.
Right.
So, I mean...
on the other side, I mean, if somebody told me that influencers got in trouble for homeopathy pushing, I would not really have so much of a problem with that. So I guess it's...
But I've seen from my experience, a lot of these creators are intelligent people, and they actually put their foot down and say that, hey, I don't want to get associated with this brand or this product. And that's the way we structured the whole contracting. And it's a two-way opt-in where the brand offers and you accept.
Right.
And you also accept on what the brand expects from you.
How much of a problem is it for you, the golden egg killing or the goose killing by the influencers? How much of that is an issue, right? I mean, like, is it something you see regularly, or is it something that happens rarely?
No, that's something we're seeing very regularly because people get carried away with this whole
I'm
new.
going to leave my job
frame.
and just do this.
Exactly, we hear a lot of that, and my team actually says, "Hey, please don't do that." Right? There are people who start using the word influencer on their LinkedIn profiles that I'm an influencer. They put it on their social media profiles. And we actually educate people that, hey, please don't do that because it's derogatory now where we are. And if someone's going to see that you're saying that, it's like, I'm an influencer. I'm going to influence you to buy this. It's like I'm telling you that I'm going to make you buy this.
Exactly.
Right? That just beats the point, right? So please don't do that. So my team keeps on educating users we see doing this. And then, there are some users who are beyond the point. So we sort of tag them and we flag them and we sort of... They don't get those opportunities, right?
Man, so that's the story. I mean, that's what you have to do as a platform, I guess, to manage and educate.
Yeah.
So.
Fortunately, we're not in the business where we have millions of users, right? So that's not the play, and we can sort of play with this with a few tens of thousands of users is what our scale is going to eventually be, and that itself is an interesting play for us.
Yeah, and that's where brands should come and get evangelized by these people. Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, so thanks so much for doing this, Lavin. I think we had some very interesting things. Any closing thoughts? Where do people reach out to you on Twitter? Any recommendations? Obviously, you've given a bunch of them for potential influencers, but how do you want to...
Yeah, how do I become an influencer?
Yeah.
So don't become an influencer, right? You don't have to. If your question is how do I become an influencer, please don't become an influencer, right?
That's the answer.
Just keep on creating content that you're passionate about and build your community around your areas of interest and passion, right? Stay true to your passion, and eventually there'll be a collab that comes your way, right? Don't build your content for the sake of a collab. The collab is an after effect, right?
And reach out to Lavin on Twitter. Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Lavin M on Twitter and Lavin I am on Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome. So,
and everybody, please remember Slack channel. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/Shunya One. Over there, there'll be a button to join the Slack channel. Please press that button, send us your email address, and we will get back to you in an invite. And also, please remember to go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. Or if you listen to podcasts anywhere else where they let you review or rate, please just give us a review, give us a rating. That kind of thing helps. And one other thing that we've been trying to tell everybody to do, please, 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 if you've enjoyed this show, tell a friend. That's the best way to kind of spread the word.
influence a friend.
Influence a friend. There you go. Influence a friend.
People talk, word spreads.
Yes. Superb. Thank you so much for doing this, Lavin. This was awesome.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next week.
There she stands, a podcast addict. Outside the bank, having traveled several miles to get in with other poor souls like her. The journey, though daunting for this youngling, will have some comfort because she has downloaded her favorite podcast. You can see more of her species on ivmpodcasts.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.